Didn't know him.
No, kid.
You got nothing to do.
Dear Zach.
Connected to this audio.
I died today. It's a lot different than I expected. You see, I always thought dying would bring me into a world that's foggy and hazy. But this place is crystal clear. It's even more real than my life on earth. I can think. I can talk. I can even feel. Right after the wreck, I could feel my spirit leaving my body. It was the weirdest thing, Zach. I thought I heard you screaming out to me, man. I must have been just imagining. At first, I was just standing in line, getting registered, I guess. They asked me for my name, and began to look at this thing they call the Book of Life. I guess they couldn't find it though, because this huge angel standing next to me grabbed me by the arm and started dragging me away. I was terrified. I had no idea what was going on. I asked the angel where he was taking me, but he didn't answer. So I asked him again. Finally, he told me that only those whose names were written in the Book of Life could enter into heaven, and the rest would be condemned to hell forever. And I was scared. The angel threw me into some kind of holding cell, where I've been sitting and thinking for a long, long time. Do you want to know what I've been thinking about? I've been thinking about you. Zach, you're a Christian. You told me so yourself. I mean, we talked about it 3 different times today. Kelly brought it up, and you laughed it off. Coach Adams brought it up, and you changed the subject. I mean, it came up right before the wreck. Well, the question I can't get out of my mind is this, Zach. Why haven't you ever told me about how to become a Christian? I mean, you say you're my friend, but if you really were, you would have told me about this Jesus, and told me how to escape this terrible place that I'm headed for. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest. The angels who have been chosen to cast me into hell are coming down the hallway. I can hear their footsteps. I've heard of this hell, Zach. They call it the lake of fire. I can't stand it, Zach. I'm terrified. No, the angels are at the door. Oh no. No! They're coming in and they're pointing at me. They're grabbing me and carrying me out of the room. I can already smell the burning sulfur and brimstone. I can see the excellent lit where it all burns. This is it. I am the battle. We're coming closer. 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 My heart is bursting with fear. They're holding me over the flames. I'm down forever. This is it. They're throwing me in. Fire. Pain. Hell. Why didn't you ever tell me about Jesus? Signed, your friend, Josh. P.S. wish you were here. Wish you were here.
I want to invite you to take your Bibles and open up with me this morning to the book of Revelation chapter 6. Revelation chapter 6. I know we had several out last Sunday, and I want to do my best to catch everybody up to speed in what's going on in our study. We entitled chapter 6, 1 to 8, The End Begins. That's what we talked about. Jesus has taken the title deed to the earth into His hand because He is the rightful owner and the rightful ruler of the universe. And He will begin to take back possession of this earth. If you want a simple definition of the tribulation, remember that the tribulation is a series of judgments where God is unleashing His wrath on the earth in order to take back possession of the earth. You remember the title deed, this scroll is sealed with how many seals? 7 seals, right? So the picture here is you have this scroll that's rolled into the middle, and when the document would be finished, and as they rolled it in, they would take wax, drop it on the paper, and that sealed it. Well, here's Jesus, and He has this scroll, this title deed to the earth in His hand, and as He unrolls it, each seal is broken. The first seal, the second seal, the third seal. And each seal represents a different phase of God's judgment that He's pouring out on earth. If you remember the first seal, or the first judgment, chapter 6, 1 to 2, it brought forth the rider on the white horse, and that was the judgment of false peace. What is it that precedes the tribulation? What comes before the tribulation? The rapture. When the rapture happens, there will be global chaos and panic. You're going to have the immediate disappearance of millions and millions of people all over the earth. We're talking about people who were Christians. We're also talking about babies. We're talking about people that were below the age of accountability. We're talking about people that did not have the intellectual capacity to make that decision about Christ. We're talking about babies in the womb. We're talking about millions of people in an instant being taken. And the kind of chaos that that's going to create. You'll have planes piloted by Christians. And what's going to happen to those planes? They're going to come crashing down. You're going to have millions of trucks and cars and motorcycles and semis on the highways all across the world. They're going to crash. You'll have patients going from hospitals. You'll have doctors and nurses going from hospitals. You'll have children missing their parents. You'll have parents missing their children. And you'll turn on the news, and there'll be all kinds of theories as to what in the world is going on, what has happened to these people, but there'll be no real answer. But there will be panic. And in the midst of all that panic, Jesus is going to break this first seal, and this first seal is going to be a false peace. He is going to allow the Antichrist to climb the political ranks. And in so doing, the Antichrist will gain some measure of political power. And initially, he's going to use that political power to create and fabricate this false peace. The world will have a peace like it has never before had. Well, then Jesus breaks the second seal. That unleashes the rider on the what color horse? The red horse. Red is the color of blood. Here we're talking about war, battle, conflict. There is now going to be war like the world has never seen. The Antichrist is going to methodically take over nation after nation. You see, after this peace, the nations have let their guard down. He's lulled them to sleep, if you will, with this peace. And He's going to be taking over nation after nation. Matthew 24, it's going to be global war where Jesus says nation will rise up against nation and kingdom will rise up against kingdom. You're going to have Antichrist moving in to take over a government, to take over a nation. Well, that nation is going to fight against Antichrist because it doesn't want to be taken over. Well, the other nations that have already been taken over by Antichrist are going to fight against the nations that are fighting against Antichrist. As Jesus said, it will be nothing but wars and rumors of wars. That will be what defines the day. Then the third seal is broken. Chapter 6, 5 to 6, that unleashes the black horse. This is the judgment of a worldwide famine. One unavoidable consequence of this kind of global war is the destruction of crops, the destruction of livestock. People that work in food production are going to be being killed, or they're going to be drafted into military service. The rider there is pictured as holding this pair of scales, meaning what? Folks is going to be having their food rationed out to them. Back in the Great Depression, you know, there was the food lines. Well, there's going to be food lines all over the world, where not only are they going to be telling you what you're going to eat, they're going to be telling you how much you're going to eat, and it ain't going to be very much. It says there, a quart of wheat for a denarius. That's not good. A quart of wheat, that's barely enough to sustain one person for one day. What's even worse is that to get that quart of wheat, it's going to require you to bring a denarius. That's one day's wage. The point is, food will be so scarce that people will have to work all day just to have enough food to feed them for that one day. And then the fourth seal is broken. That's chapter 6, 7 to 8. The ashen horse is unleashed. Ashen is the word chloros. It refers to a sickly, green, palish color. It is the word that was used to describe the decomposition of a corpse. What it says here, verse 8, is that through the sword, which is war, through famine, through disease, pestilence, through wild beasts, 1/4 of the world's population will die. Now just think about that. World War II, the world's population was estimated to be 2.3 billion. 60 million died across the board. That means World War II, or better yet, Hitler was responsible for 3%, for the death of 3% of humanity on planet Earth. That is staggering. But it doesn't come close to comparing to the judgment that will be unleashed in this fourth seal. We're not talking about 3% of humanity dying. We're talking about 25% of humanity dead. Just to put that into perspective a little bit, right now the world's population is estimated to be 6 billion. That would mean that 1.5 billion people die. In the countries, in the communities, in the cities, there will literally be the smell of death. You will walk outside and you will smell death. You can forget hospitals for people to go and die in. You can forget funeral homes that will handle the dead. You can forget all that. People will be burying their loved ones in their backyards. Their bodies will be left in the street. But either way, there is going to be death like the world has never seen. And here's what's really scary about that. How long does the tribulation last? Anybody remember? 7 years. The first 4 seals only cover the first half of the tribulation. We're only 3.5 years into this thing. And the tribulation does not go from bad to better. It goes from bad to worse. Things will get demonstrably worse. As we move into this second half of the tribulation, the Bible, like Revelation chapter 7, verse 14, it distinguishes the second half of the tribulation as the Great Tribulation. Things will get worse. Well, we come to chapter 6 and verse 9 today. And when you come here, we are at the halfway mark of the tribulation. And we are introduced to the 5th seal. And here is the 5th seal, the 5th phase of judgment that God unleashes. When the Lamb, and who is the Lamb? Come on now, y'all got to do better than that. Jesus. When Jesus broke the 5th seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the Word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. Now, who are these people? Where are they at? Are these people in hell? Are they on the earth? Are they in heaven? Where are they at? They're in heaven, right? They're at God's altar. They're in heaven. So these are Christians. These are what we call tribulation saints. These are people who missed the rapture. In other words, they got left behind. Who gets left behind at the rapture? People that were not right. People that were not saved. People that were lost. Well, now they're in heaven. What happened? Well, after they missed the rapture, and some time during these 3 years of the tribulation, they've given their lives to the Lord. They've been saved. Well, since they've been saved, what has happened to them? It says they have been slain. They've been killed. Right. Now, why? Was it because of they were in the battle, in the war? Was it because of famine? Was it because of disease? Why were they killed? It says because of the Word of God. In other words, because of the Bible. They were killed because of the Bible, because of the testimony which they had maintained. These people are killed simply because they're Christians. These are what we call martyrs. People that were killed because of their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So now there is in the tribulation an international violent persecution of the Christians. This is not a casual persecution. Just real quick, Brother Ricky, you know I've heard people talk about how, well, I'm not saved, but, even after the rapture, I can still get saved. You really don't want to wait for that day. You do not want to wait for that day. This is a violent persecution. This is persecution this is not even persecution that, well, we got to do this in the dark. We got to do this undercover. This is legalized persecution. This is persecution from the government. This is persecution from society. This is persecution from military personnel. This is persecution from average Joes wandering down the streets. This is persecution from everybody. There is now a movement in the tribulation where the general concept, the general way of thinking is, we got to get rid of the Christians. Now, here's a question I want you to think about. All right? Why, and think about it real hard before you answer it. Why would there be persecution of Christians during the tribulation? If you really think about it, does it really make sense that in the midst of World War III going on, in the midst of disease like the world has never seen, in the midst of famine like the world has never seen, in the midst of 25% of the world has died, in the midst of all that, does it really make a whole lot of sense that people are just so eager to get rid of the Christians? Usually during times of suffering, people are willing to put their prejudices to the side. I love reading the stories about in the Civil War where you had white men and black men fighting side by side against the enemy. Obviously, in that era, white man typically hated black man and black man typically hated white man. However, you can read story after story where black men were risking their lives to save white men and white men were risking their lives to save black men. Why? I thought they hated each other. What happened? What happened is we're talking about war. People's lives are at stake. And when people's lives are at stake, I don't care what color your skin is, and frankly, I don't care what your religion is. For this time, we can set our differences aside because we have a common goal. We just want to stay alive. Now, we're talking about the tribulation. Everybody across the world has one goal and one goal only. I just want to make it till tomorrow. I just want to stay alive. It seems to me that whether or not a person is a Christian, if you're a lost person in tribulation, it would seem to me that whether or not someone's a Christian is totally irrelevant. Relevant questions would be things like this. Hey, is that an enemy advancing on our position? Is that a bomb siren that I hear? Is this going to be enough food to get me through this day? Is this water clean enough to drink, or is it going to make me sick? Hey, I've got these symptoms. Does this mean that I have this disease that's been killing so many people? That's a relevant question. Not, hey, is this guy a Christian? Because if he is, we need to kill him. Why is there such an obsession in the tribulation to kill Christians? Obviously because when we come to the tribulation, Christians have been vilified. There is a kind of false propaganda that's being spread. Hitler was a genius with propaganda. He would spread propaganda and he would make the Allies look like the bad guys. What he did was he manipulated his population into believing the way he wanted them to believe. It's very similar to what North Korea does today. North Korea blocks out its population from hearing any information outside their country. They control the media. They control the narrative of what will and will not be said on the news. It kind of sounds somewhat similar to what's going on in our society. But in the tribulation, the Antichrist will be a genius when it comes to fake news. He will be a genius when it comes to flipping the script and controlling the narrative. He will make the Christians look like the bad guys, and he will make himself look like the good guy. The question is, why does the Antichrist feel like he needs to do this? Why does he feel like he needs to do this? We're not going to get into this very, very much, but right now we're halfway through the tribulation. It won't be long until Antichrist will accomplish what is called the abomination of desolation. This is where Antichrist, he's going beyond being this great political leader. He's going beyond being this kind of president of the world. Now he is going to set himself up as a god. He is going to declare deity. And you know what the world's going to do? They're going to worship him. And he's going to love every minute of it. If you want a preview of that, fast forward to chapter 13 of Revelation. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. And the dragon, that is Satan. In this passage, the dragon is Satan and the beast is Antichrist. So we'll read it that way. And Satan stood on the island of the seashore. Then I saw the Antichrist coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the Antichrist, which I saw, was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And Satan gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. Verse 3, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the Antichrist. They worshipped Satan because he gave his authority to Antichrist, and they worshipped the Antichrist, saying, "Who is like the Antichrist? Who is able to wage war with him? There was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven." You can go back to chapter 6 now. But this is what Antichrist is working towards. He wants to deceive the world into believing that he is actually God, and he's going to manipulate the world into worshiping him. Now, and by the way, that shouldn't surprise us, because Satan tried that a long time ago, right? He tried to dethrone God. It didn't work out so well for him. Well, now we're at the end of the world, and through Antichrist, he's trying to dethrone God again. Now, that takes place in chapter 13. We're still in chapter 6. Antichrist has not yet set himself up as this God, yet Antichrist is already having Christians killed. Why is he doing that? Do y'all remember that time when, I don't know that it's been a year yet, but I bought a 97 black extended cab S10. Any of y'all remember that? Why are you laughing? Like Joel Osteen is my favorite preacher. That truck was my favorite truck. For those of you, there's some new faces in here, let me give you just the summary. I found the advertisement for it on Craigslist. That was probably problem number one. But the guy on the used car lot in Mississippi, and he said, "I tell you what, I'll bring it down to you. You're a pastor, I know you're a busy man, I'll bring it down to you." Okay. And he brought it to me on the car haul. And he said, "Yeah, the guy that works for me, he was out of work today, so this is the only way I could do it." And I was dumb enough to pay the man money. And this guy was so good at covering up stuff, hiding stuff. And it was like as soon as he left, everything just started tearing up on him. But I finally got it going after a compressor, after electric fans, after alternator, the one thing after another. I finally got it going down the road. I was going down Highway 18, Knuckles Hill, on 18, going down that hill, and the truck caught on fire. Actually caught on fire. The only thing I had to put this fire out, I had 2 items. Just purchased grape slushy from Sonic. I'm talking about just got it. And the shirt on my back, it required both items to put the fire out. You know what happened? Your transmission lines go into your radiator to cool your transmission fluid so you don't burn up your transmission. Well, the radiator was cracked, come to find out. So it was leaking transmission fluid. So this guy said, "No problem. I'll put 3/8 rubber fuel line like what you put on a lawnmower, not a Chevrolet pickup truck. I'll put that on, I'll block off the lines so that it won't cool the fluid." And this guy, he'll never know the difference. And I did. I really did. So, got all that handled. One day I'm driving down the road and the oil pressure drops. Let me rephrase that. The oil pressure dropped on this recently rebuilt engine. Yeah, right. Needed a new oil pump. Took it to the mechanic, and I went to pick it up. And you know what he found in the bottom of the oil pan? I held up my hand. The man put a bolt about that long in my hand. Now, a bolt on an engine is fine. A bolt in an engine, that is not good. But he said, "Hey, this is bad news to any operation." Well, here is Antichrist, and he is building this world-dominating operation. He's got the engine going. Well, Christians are bad news to his operation. What do you think Christians are going to be doing during this time? They're going to be moving through the world saying, "Listen, this immediate, instant disappearance of millions and millions of people. You think that's just some coincidence? You think, what, you think it was a real alien abduction or something? This worldwide war that's going on, all this famine, all this disease, 25% of humanity's dead. You think that's coincidence? No, this is the judgment of God. And they're going to begin explaining to people that their only hope is to turn to who? Turn to Jesus Christ. Now, is that good news or bad news for Antichrist? That's bad news for Antichrist. Because if these Christians are allowed to do this, if they're allowed to spread the gospel and lead more people to Christ, then are these Christians, are they going to worship Antichrist when he sets himself up as God? Not at all. So, the Antichrist has a very simple plan. Exterminate Christians from the world. His strategy is to get the world, incite the world into anger so that they will find, persecute, kill Christians. Now, how's he going to do that? Well, just like with everything else, I think he'll be very wise. I think he'll be very deceptive. I think he'll be very cunning. I think folks one day will turn on the news and their Antichrist, as the kind of president of the world, will be given his State of the New World Order address. I think he's going to look to people that everybody, when 25% of the world dies, listen, everybody's lost loved ones, right? Everybody's lost families. Everybody's hurting. Everybody's devastated. He's going to seize on that moment and he's going to say, now y'all, listen, we're trying to bring in this new world. We're trying to bring in this new way of life, but there's one group of people standing in our way. Who is that? The Christians. The Christians are standing in our way. You're all hurting. You're all devastated because you've lost loved ones. Well, these Christians, they disrespect the memory of your loved ones. You know how they do that? They're saying that this is all the judgment of God, that God was punishing your loved ones, and that's why they're dead. We cannot tolerate this. This is a time where we need words of peace. We need words of hope. We need words of inspiration. But what are these Christians doing? They're going around saying that this is judgment. Worst of all, these Christians are telling you that the only hope is to turn to this dead carpenter from Nazareth named Jesus, who's nothing more than a bedtime story. He's going to get the world's emotions just rolling. And he will get to the point to where he's going to say, we have but only one choice. We've got to get rid of what stands in our way. And what stands in our way are Christians. And the persecution will begin, and it will be extremely intense. Now here's the real question of this passage. Each seal unleashes a judgment from God on earth. What is the judgment in this passage? Verse 10, Revelation 6:10, and they cried out. Who's they? Remember, these are Christians that have been killed during the tribulation. They are before God, and they cry out saying, how long, O Lord? Have you ever felt that way before? How long? I mean, they are desperate. This is really important to them, what they're about to ask. How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each of them a white robe, and they were told that they should rest for a little while longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed. What is the judgment in this? What is the judgment? The judgment is this. Murdered Christians are praying. And if you're on the wrong side of the fence of that prayer, you're walking on very, very dangerous ground. Let me ask you this question. Does God respond to the request of His people? How many of you believe in prayer? Raise your hand. Will you believe in prayer because you believe you serve a God who's in the business of answering prayer, right? Hold your place there. Turn to the Gospel of Luke. I'm going to show you a story. Luke chapter 18. Luke 18, verse 1. There, say here. Now Jesus was telling them a parable to show that at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart. So this is Jesus telling a story, teaching a lesson on what? On prayer. And here's the lesson. In a certain city there was a judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. So is this a good judge or a bad judge? He's a bad judge. He's a very bad judge. There was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him saying, give me legal protection from my opponent. Now this lady is merely asking the judge to do his job. To give to her what is good, what is right, what is just. Verse 4, for a while he was unwilling. But afterward he said to himself, even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give her legal protection, because if I don't, by continually coming, she's going to wear me out. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge said. Now, will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day and night? And will he delay long over them? Now go back to Revelation. What's the point of that? Here you have this wicked judge. He doesn't care about what God wants. He doesn't care about what's right. He doesn't care about what's good or what's just. Yet, he eventually gives to this woman what is right because he's annoyed, right? Just because he wanted to get rid of it. Get out. Okay, here, take it. Just leave me alone. Okay, the point is, here we have God, and he is a righteous judge. He does want what is good, what is right, what is just. And not only is he a righteous judge, he's also a loving and merciful judge. And the point Jesus is making is, hey, when you pray, you should not be doubting at all, because you have a God who is definitely going to be willing to give you what is right, what is good, what is just. The judgment of this fifth seal is that these Christians who have been murdered in the name of Christ are in heaven praying to God to do what is good, what is right, and what is just. Let me ask you this. We hear about the God of love. We hear about the God of grace. We hear about the God of mercy. We hear about the God of patience.